That's better. Yeah, so apologies for the delay in starting this meeting, which was due to a technical problem at the council end. Good evening to members, education co-optees, officers and members of the public watching on YouTube. Welcome to the final meeting of the Children's Mental Health, Wellbeing and Resilience Scrutiny Panel, which I hope will be a fairly brief meeting. The agenda for this meeting includes the draft final report, and that's on the council website. So for members of the public, if you Google Ealing Democracy, you'll be able to navigate to it from there. Turning to the agenda, we begin with item 1, apologies for absence. I have not received any. Does anyone know of any other apologies? Any apologies?
No, Chair, there have been no apologies received.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is matters to be considered in private. There are none. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Please raise your Zoom hand if you have a declaration of interest to make. I don't see any. So we move on to the minutes, which I'll go through page by page. So in terms of the numbering of the minutes themselves, that's pages 1 to 14. So page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, and finally page 14. So in the absence of anything being raised on that, does the panel approve the meetings as does the panel approve the minutes as a correct record of that meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Very good, thank you. So now we turn to the only real item on the agenda, which is the draft final report. So I think we'll spend most of our time reviewing the recommendations and potentially suggesting additional ones. But I'll start by asking members and education co-optees whether you have any comments or questions on the body of the report. So this is anything in the report other than the recommendations. Yes, Councillor Woodruff.
It's just well, at the very end of the minutes, it said we resolved, agreed to conduct a virtual tour of the log cabin. Presumably, that didn't happen. We ought to probably note that that didn't happen. Something like that. Yes,
that's right. I mean, I think it is unfortunate that it didn't happen in the end. I know that Harjeet had made efforts to try to chase up on that, but it hasn't happened. And as this is the final meeting and the report will be agreed at the end of this meeting, it's too late to have it now. So yeah, I think it would be worth noting, you know, with regret that it didn't prove possible to do it even as a virtual meeting. I mean, I don't know whether officers would like to comment on that at all, or just maybe not. I mean, yeah, I think we can just note that. So yeah. So, well, Charles, would you like to?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Councillor Borden. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have problems with my microphone. Yeah, it'd be possible to set up a meeting. You know, it's returned face to face. So if you would like that done now, it's possible. And we have got another to be feasible. Depends on your time, really.
I mean, I think that the difficulty now is that we're on the meeting that's agreeing the final report. So kind of, if we did, if we did find anything out at a site visit at this stage, it'd be too late to include it in the report. So I don't know what other members think, but I think it's more of a question of just sort of noting, unfortunately, we weren't able to do it, rather than trying to do it now after the final meeting of the panel.
Yeah, I think, I would agree with that. But if any panel members would like to have a visit, we can make that possible for them. So I absolutely agree. It's unlikely to change the recommendations, but if you would like to do that, I'm happy to organise it for them.
I think, yes, I think that's very welcome. I think that's a very helpful proposal. So if any members would like to do that, if they contact Charles or perhaps Harjeet. So great. Okay, I think that's good, and that can be noted. So that's a more constructive thing to note, isn't it? So that's fine to note,
disturbance, too much disturbing.
Yes, sorry about that.
Somebody's mic is on.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's my son in the background. It is, yes, indeed it is. Sorry about that. I've told him off. So hopefully we should have less disturbance now. Yeah,
wicked man.
Sorry about that. It's the perils of virtual meetings from home. Yes. Right. Okay. So where we were was moving on to any comments or questions on the body of the report, not involving the recommendations. So are there any comments or questions from anyone which don't relate to the recommendations or potential future recommendations? If there's nothing in that category, I mean, I would just like to commend Harjeet for the dedicated work that she's done in putting the report together. There is a great deal of really good material in there. Yes, thanks to Harjeet for that. Okay, so if there are no questions on that, we'll move to the recommendations. So the recommendations appear in, oh, hang on, sorry, something's in the chat here. Sorry. So just reading that in the chat from Lisa. All right, well, we'll look at that when we come to the recommendations. Yes, Simon.
It's just that I did have one totally minor comment on the report, page 38 of 62. There is a reference to Nadine Dorries, who I think is sort of, we ought to put the then Minister for Patient Safety, because she's Secretary of State for Culture now, isn't she? So it's just maybe just saying that she was then Minister for Patient Safety. She hasn't been for a while.
Yes, I see. Departmental working group. Yes. Okay. Well, just that's fine. I'm sure. That's just a minor correction. Nadine Dorries MP, then Minister for Patient Safety, Suicide Prevention and Mental Health. Yeah. Okay, I'm sure that's fine. Good. And Simon, you've still got your hand up. It's not an additional point, is it?
No, I was just waiting for you to notice it, really.
Just what? Sorry. No. Okay. That's fine. Yeah. Good. Okay. Great. So we'll move on to recommendations. So the easiest way is where they're listed. Yeah. Okay. So on page 81 of 82, we have the sub recommendations. I'll go through them one by one and invite members to either agree them or suggest any potential changes to the wording. I see that there is already a comment on 5 from Lisa, so we'll get to that when we get to it. Right, so recommendation 1, the Ealing Council should lobby the government for more funding to help with the mental health and wellbeing of children and young people in this borough.
So what are we going to defund as a
Any comments
result?
on that?
What do we want to defund as a result? Where's money going to come from?
I mean, that's a reasonable political point, but I don't think that.
I object to it being a weak recommendation as well. It's an easy get out. We want more money, more money, more money, without justifying it. How many old people do you want to die to have more funding for this?
Well, let's see what other members think. Well, just to say before we go on to that, I think in terms of what your initial comment, it wouldn't be within the remit of this group to suggest cutting money from something else. But anyway, yeah, Councillor Burke.
Sorry, just remind me what we're
Councillor
looking
Burke's
at.
still on mute.
Yeah. We're looking at page 74. What page are we on?
Okay, so we're looking at page 81 of 82, which is the recommendation. So that's got all 7 recommendations in one place. The recommendations they also appear at the end of each section. But it's easier to go through them there.
Slightly confusing about so slightly that was my point about this, how we put them in the report. It was a comment about putting them together, but I don't think. I just wanted to respond to the previous point. I don't think we're saying that we should lobby for the expense of it. We should lobby for more money. I don't see that there's any contradiction about saying we want money withdrawn from somewhere else. So I think that's perfectly reasonable.
It's an easy get out to say we want more money, but without saying where it's coming from.
Well, okay, we can say where it should come. You want us to say where it should come from?
This is getting a bit to and fro.
But the only thing I would
ask, please. I think
as a general rule in scrutiny, we've avoided trying to ask for extra funding because that's always an easy get out and it's a weak recommendation.
Okay, well, you've made your point.
Sorry,
Councillor
John,
Woodruff had his hand up next.
Sorry, John, my point was, I just worry about the bit on the end, in this borough. I wouldn't say that because it's a bit kind of parochial to, because that does feel a bit like we're arguing for money for our borough, not for, just because somebody's in a different postcode. It's a bit pedantic, but I wouldn't have the in this borough on it.
Okay, I mean, I guess again the issue there is, well, yeah, okay, that's a fair point, but I'll hear from other members. Yeah, Councillor Woodruff.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways it is a weak recommendation. I mean, we could have a much stronger recommendation if Councillor Young wants it. I mean, clearly we are lobbying. That's fair enough to lobby the government. I think if you lobby the council, that's kind of different because we are responsible for the budget ourselves. I mean, I think it's entirely reasonable recommendation. It's we're asking for more funding. We're not even saying how much more funding, but I think we've been through this report and it's clear there are areas that do need more funding.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rosardi.
Yeah, just to reiterate what's just been said, I don't think we need to justify, or I don't think we need to specify exactly which departments need to lose funding in order for extra funding to be diverted to mental health. So, I really don't see a problem with it.
I'm losing you. I don't know if this is just at my end, but had you finished? The last thing I heard was mental health, but that was the end of your contribution, was it?
I said I see absolutely no problem in having that as a recommendation.
Oh, okay, great, good, thank you. And finally on this, Councillor Mohan, and then we'll move to a decision on what we do with this.
I think it's a common practice that panels make recommendations. That's what we can do. We don't have any powers as such, in my knowledge, to force anybody, and that's what we do. And we are asking the council to get more funding, and it's a valid sort of request or recommendation, and that's what the panels do. Thank you.
Okay, so it seems like there's a clear majority in favour of the recommendation in some form. There is, however, there's a question about whether we want to take off the last 3 words in this borough, whether we're making it more of a kind of a national point or relating specifically to this borough. Does anyone have any comment on that particular bit? I can see Councillor Woodruff and Councillor Mohan. Are those new hands?
Well, it was old hand, but I think these words can stay because we are talking about our own borough, and that's what we have discussed. That's the picture we have before us. So I think it's quite okay to keep it as it is.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would expect government to target our borough, but to say we're a scrutiny committee for Ealing, and I think we're pushing for that. But I don't have any problems about deleting if we want. But I think it's probably better to keep it in, to be honest.
Okay, so we seem to have a consensus for leaving the recommendation as it originally was, unless anyone wants to push it to a vote.
I'll push it to a vote because I wish to record my dissent.
Fair enough. Okay, fine. Can I see? Well, so virtual hands down for clarity. So yes, and Karam as well. If you can put your hands down, and then we'll have.
Sorry. Just a minute.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, if we can have a vote on the recommendation as originally written in the paper. So it's recommendation 1 as written. Can I see those in favour? Looks like. Can we clarify? Do education co-optees, are they voting or non-voting?
They're voting.
They are voting, right. Okay, great. Sorry about that.
I think we have voted in the past.
Fine. Sorry, I wasn't just sure. So that's, I can see 8 in favour.
Are you voting yourself, Chair?
No, it's fine. I won't vote unless it needs a casting vote, which it doesn't look like this. That's 8 votes in favour. If you'd like to put your hands down. Still have your hand up. Yeah, great. And can I see those against, please? Right, so that's 1 vote against. So recommendation 1 is carried by 8 votes to 1. Thank you.
Can my dissent be noted, please?
Great. Yes, I'm sure that's fine. Yeah. Good. Now we're moving on to recommendation 2. The portfolio holder responsible for the well-being of children and young people should lobby government for permanent funding regarding this commitment instead of small financial bids on short-term projects. Can I have any comments or objection to that? Or is everyone happy to
agree? I think.
Everyone happy to agree that recommendation?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Very good. And recommendation 3, the council's health improvement team should resort an annual health improvement visit, as only 75% of schools were visited in the previous year. Are there any comments or objection to that one? Yes, Lisa, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it was just a comment really on behalf of the health improvement team. They try incredibly hard to get agreement across all schools for these visits to take place, but it's not mandatory. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're setting a target, it needs to have some leeway in it to allow the fact that we will never get 100% of schools engaged in these visits. It's never been possible, and it is incredibly difficult for a whole multitude of reasons. So just to bear that in mind, really.
Well, so it would be an option to detune the wording slightly to say something like should endeavour to ensure. Maybe.
Or to give them some grace. So if you're setting a target, that it would be 90% of schools, because that would allow for, because it's otherwise if it was 100% target, it would be impossible to achieve.
Right, Councillor Woodruff, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I mean, just so that everyone knows what happens is these recommendations go to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and they also go to officers for response. So I would have thought, I think this is our aspiration, this is what we want them to do, but officers can come back at that point and say, we can't actually do it, and then the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can make a decision about it. I think that's the way to do it. If officers are saying that it's going to be difficult to do, then I think that's the level for that to happen. As councillors, this is what we want to happen, but officers might legitimately say we can't do it. You know,
that's a fair point. I mean, I think it would be if there's something that's technically technically incorrect in our recommendations, or something that's based on a misunderstanding or something, I think it's very helpful to have officer input to fix it at this time. But yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree that this is really, our aspiration as councillors is for it to be 100%, and then it's for officers to come back at the next stage in their responses. I'm inclined to agree, but Councillor Lizardi, you have your hand up as well.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No. Yeah. All I'd say is I think we could soften the wording slightly to say, endeavour to or aim to achieve or to something like that, so that, because I don't really see these as hard and fast targets that must be reached or attained. It's more of it's an aspiration, and I think softening the language slightly would allow for the fact that it's never, not necessarily ever going to happen.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, I did suggest. Sorry about that. Sorry about that noise. I did suggest earlier on. Actually, sorry. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Martin. Before we move to a decision on it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of inclined to agree with Councillor Sardi, and because I think setting an actual target rather than all is a bit more realistic, and maybe we could say something like a minimum of 90%. Because if there are some schools that just don't want to engage and you're never going to get in there, then you're not doing anything. I mean, the officers aren't, I think, sort of incentivized to do something when they know they can't do it anyway. So I think we should say a target, which is realistic.
Right. Well, we're getting a number of different views here. So, Councillor Woodruff, was your hand up to come back, or was that an old hand? No. Okay. Well, I mean, so what I suggested earlier on as maybe a simpler change would be should endeavour to ensure. I think that's probably that's the sort of thing that we could put in just to make it to recognise factually that the team don't have the authority to demand that all schools receive a visit. So I think it's kind of reflecting the reality of the situation, rather than, I think that may be a more appropriate thing than putting in a percentage. Would everyone be happy if we amend so with recommendation 3 amended so that instead of should ensure, it reads should endeavour to ensure? Does the committee agree to that?
That's fine with me, Chair.
It's still not realistic.
No, well, and I don't think it's a target anymore then.
You would have a target of increasing the percentage rather than just saying 100%.
Okay, we're getting different views again.
Chair's 100% is a not easy. It's a very hard.
Indeed. Okay, so what we can say, so if, does someone want to suggest some wording, some specific wording that has a specific target in, and then we can take a vote between that and just the endeavour to.
You could say the council's health improvement team should endeavour to visit a higher percentage of schools than 75% which were visited in the previous year. How about that?
I mean, the problem with that is some members have been saying there ought to be a percentage to make a specific target, and that's not, it's very specific.
You can choose a specific number if you want, but what's the reasoning behind it?
All right, well, I mean, you've suggested some, so Councillor Young has suggested some wording. Is there support for that wording? So that's making it an endeavour to increase the percentage.
Improve on the percentage on what it has been in the previous year.
Yeah. Is there agreement with that recommended wording?
No. I'd rather have a target. And we have targets for all sorts of other things in the council. So why not this? And they usually aren't 100%. They're usually in the 90s.
Chair, may I just come
Sure.
in then?
Okay. Yes.
Because if cabinet accepted this recommendation, they would then decide how many schools. So it would be for them to set that target about how many was realistically achievable. And they would consult the relevant officers to ensure that that then happened.
Yes, that would overcome the issue about plucking a figure out of midair without having justification for it. So, I mean, Arjit, would you suggest that we? Yeah, I mean, one way of doing this would be to recommend to cabinet that they set a target for the percentage of schools that are visited that is higher than 75%. Is that what you're suggesting, Arjit?
Yes. So once the executive agrees a recommendation, then they would work with the relevant service officers to ensure that they then going to implement it. And I would go with Councillor Young's suggestion of wording for this one. And then cabinet then in drawing up its action plan can then come up with what was feasible at the time for them to achieve that higher percentage. So that percentage could be set at that time, and OSC would monitor those the implementation of those recommendations on a 6-monthly basis anyway.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so it would be a recommendation to cabinet. It would be just that would just come out. Okay, so I think unless any other members have got comments on this item, I think we can take a vote between, essentially between Councillor Young's wording and Councillor Martin's wording, isn't it? So it's where the point we ought to be having an endeavour to increase the percentage. What was the percentage that you were suggesting, Councillor Martin?
I said 90 because that's what Lisa said, but if it is the case that that can be done later, I'm quite happy with the idea that it can be set at cabinet. That's fine.
You could ask the cabinet to set a target for an improvement in the attendance.
I think what Harjeet was saying is that effectively is what happens anyway through the scrutiny, the process of cabinet going through scrutiny recommendations. So that would be what would boil out of it anyway. So I think if we stick with Councillor Young's version of the recommendation, so that is endeavouring to increase the percentage. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, great. Good. Okay,
That's fine.
brilliant.
That's fine.
Good, thank you. So we'll move on to recommendation 4, which is that the London Mental Health Programme Executive should revise the commissioning arrangements to be consistently based on an individual's residence rather than GP postcode for Tier 2 and Tier 3 services in order to reduce problems transitioning between tiers and into adult services. Are there any comments or questions on that recommendation? I think you might be still on mute because I'm not hearing anything.
I'm trying to remember what they were saying about it, but is it definitely within their gift to do that? I thought they were saying it wasn't within their gift. I could have remembered it all wrong though.
This is why it's helpful having officers here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do Lisa or Charles have input on whether that's factually it is something that they're able to do?
Yeah, so I'm happy to come in, Councillor Ball. So on the Tier 2 offer, the early help offer, that is something within our gift, because that's funding that sits in commissioning within the council. More problematic is the more specialist services which are commissioned by health through the CCG currently, and in the future through the integrated care partnership. Because it's a cross-borough arrangement in terms of commissioning, it might be possible to do, but without that, it's not within our gift within the council, but it's within a conversation within integrated care partnership.
So would it be better to have wording that said where possible to be should use all of their powers to where possible? Because it's just it goes back to that thing about setting a recommendation that is not possible for somebody. So if we don't need to do the wordsmithing now, but if the wordsmithing could reflect that it's not always going to be possible for them to do that, I think that would probably be slightly better.
Okay, yeah, so is there general agreement? Yeah, we don't need to say the precise wording, but if we detune this one slightly to make it clear that it's where it's possible. Lisa, did you want to come in?
It was just thought, you might want to separate it out. Because as Charles said, we can do that for Tier 2, the Tier 2 services we commission as a council. So we could do that because we're just about to revamp those contracts. Whereas, as Charles said, Tier 3 is not necessarily within our gift. So I don't know. It might just make it easier.
That makes good sense to me.
And so in fact, we've got London Mental Health Programme Executive. So what you're saying is Ealing Council itself can decide on Tier 2. Is that's correct, is it?
That's correct, yes, Chair.
Sorry, yeah, good. Yeah, so recommendation 2 should be Ealing Council should revise the commissioning arrangements, blah, 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 for Tier 2. And then there'll be a new recommendation, which would be a slightly detuned one. And is the London Mental Health Programme Executive the correct body that makes the decisions on Tier 3 services? Sorry, I'm looking for officers to.
That's what was cited in that meeting. So the NHS had used that terminology for the body that was doing it.
Okay,
You could ask for clarification.
Yes, but I can double check with those officers again.
Yeah.
So subject to clarification, so we'd have a new recommendation, which would be that the London mental health, it would be exactly the same as the current one, except with tier 2 missing, because we addressed tier 2 separately. That's correct, isn't it? So is everyone happy with those 2 recommendations? So the revised version of recommendation 4 plus an additional recommendation relating to tier 3. Any comments on those, or is everyone happy with those?
That's fine.
Yeah, we agreed.
Good, thank you.
Fine.
Now we move on to recommendation 5, and I know there's already a comment from Lisa about that, but I'll read it out first, and members can think about it. Recommendation 5: the work to establish a central point of access for all referrals to Ealing's Children's Services should be continued and successfully concluded as soon as possible. And we had suggested wording from Lisa: work to establish a central point of access for all social, emotional wellbeing and mental health referrals for children and young people should be continued and successfully concluded as soon as possible. Just trying to see. Sorry, well, Lisa, would you? Yeah, you got your hand up. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, the reason being is the focus of the central point of access is for all these referrals that are social, emotional wellbeing and mental health. If you talk about all referrals to children's services, there are other, you're talking about then physical health, and there are different single points of access for that, and it's going to get very confusing. So the aspiration initially is to have a central point of access for all of the services that you've heard about over this report. And ultimately, the bigger aspiration would be eventually for one for everything, but that's so complicated. We thought we'd start with something that is already complex, but manageable as a first stage.
Right, interesting. So I guess again, going back to the conversation we had earlier, it's a question of thinking whether this is a sort of necessary rewording of a recommendation to make it sort of factually correct, or whether this is more in the area of us having a wider aspiration that's being reduced. I mean, certainly, I think the context in which we were talking was very much in terms of those services, because that's what we've been looking at in this panel. So I think I would be minded to accept the revised wording. Do I have any comments from other members on that though?
Yeah, I think that's wide-ranging enough.
Yeah,
I agree with it.
Okay, so we agree it with Lisa's suggested wording that she's put in the chat. So actually, yeah, I did read it out earlier on, yes, because of course I mustn't forget that anyone watching on YouTube close. I'll read it out. People on YouTube. So this will be the recommendation 5 will now be the work to establish a central point of access for all social, emotional well-being and mental health referrals for children and young people should be continued and successfully concluded as soon as possible. Great, good. So everyone's happy with that.
Yeah.
Good. And recommendation 6. Recommendation 6. All council services and National Health Service partners should work together to simplify the jargon and to make child and adolescent mental health services pathways more straightforward for service users and parents. Councillor Burke.
I think they're 2 different things. I think one about jargon is, I don't mind us having that as a recommendation, but it's a bit like motherhood and apple pie. But I think the one about the pathways, I think is a totally different thing. So I think it should be 2 recommendations. And I think, the second part of it is in some ways more important, because the word pathways doesn't mean a lot to public, if you know what I mean. So I think that's very valid, but I would separate those 2 out.
Yes, okay, great. I think that's a good idea. Unless there are any comments to the contrary, I think we split them out into the two recommendations. I mean, literally, yes, it is just a kind of run-on sentence with an and in the middle. So it's just the first half before the and in the recommendation, and the second half the new recommendation. So are there well, is that agreed? So those two recommendations arising out of recommendation 6. Are we happy with both of those?
Agreed.
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 Very good.
Yep.
Great.
Agreed.
And final recommendation that's there at the moment, but please have your thinking caps on to think of any additional recommendations. But the final recommendation that's there currently, recommendation 7, the panel endorses the work that is being done to make child and adolescent mental health services less compartmentalized and more holistic, including the implementation of the Thrive framework, and encourages further initiatives in this direction. So are there any comments on that or objections to that? I mean, clearly this is sort of in the category of recommendations which are not suggesting great change. They're just more kind of endorsing what's the direction of travel that's already happening. But yeah, Councillor Rosardi.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's not actually a recommendation. Although I support it entirely, it's not technically speaking a recommendation. But you know, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, helpful, because I think it was something that members were very supportive of, and I think having that support is helpful in case there was any future suggestion to change the direction there. I mean, yeah, Councillor Lizardi, were you saying that we shouldn't have it as a recommendation, or were you just saying it's sort of not?
No, I was just making
much a recommendation because it's not changing.
I was just making the point it wasn't really a recommendation. No, but I think I wouldn't want to with you know take it.
You wouldn't want to delete it. Fine. No. Okay, good, great. Okay, so in that case, do we all agree? Recommendation 7.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Agreed.
Good. And so finally, does anyone else have any suggestions for additional recommendations that have arisen out of anything that we heard during the course of the 3 previous meetings? Speak now or hold your peace. Okay, yes. So in that case, right, we do have some technical wording to say, don't we? We've got, yeah, so we have to formally agree a noting and a delegation. So do we note that the officer comments in section 8 will be requested once the recommendations are finalised? So we note that, yeah. And do we agree that the overview and scrutiny officer be granted delegated authority to make changes to the final report in consultation with the chair and vice chair for submission to the overview and scrutiny committee and thereafter to cabinet?
Yeah,
we should have some agreed on that. Yes.
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 Agreed.
Agreed.
Good. So that concludes the consideration of the draft final report. So thank you very much for all those comments on that. There was a note, the briefing note about scrutiny topics, which is just asking. So the panel's asked to suggest topics for scrutiny in 2022-23. I understand that there is some thought that there may be a different process for identifying scrutiny topics, which is being thought about, but certainly however the mechanism works in the next municipal year, it would be very helpful for members to put forward any suggestions for.
You want to expand on what you just said
scrutinise.
about a different method?
Yeah, so there is some thinking about aligning scrutiny more with kind of particular themes, as opposed to having standalone annual groups looking, spending a year looking at a particular subject area and coming up with a report like this. So
going back to the standing panels.
A bit, yes, Back to the Future, somewhat, but it would be a new model. But anyway, the point is that whatever the mechanism, clearly there are ways to scrutinise particular topics, and so proposals for topics are still very useful. But I'm just raising the flag that they may be addressed in a slightly different way. Okay, and I think the idea of that item, RG, was just to, as a note to members, to put things forward rather than to wasn't it?
Yes, because the next OSC meeting would be looking at that. So if this panel did have any suggestions, they can submit those by email afterwards.
Fine. Okay, that's great. Good. Yeah, so that concludes the agenda. There's no data. Oh, sorry, Councillor Woodruff.
Well, I think first of all, we ought to just say, I mean, this has been a hugely important subject over scrutiny committee, but at the same time, it is very complex. The whole, and I think the officers have been to be congratulated by the way they've led us through it all, because for most of us, I think a lot of it was it was sort of new, and the reports are very well written. I was going through it today and thinking that that's something to keep, actually, because it's a good basis of everything. So I think the officer's report should have been congratulated. And well, it's the last meeting, so as vice chair, I will congratulate yourself on chairing the committee for the year, leading us through what is quite a complicated area. And thank you for the chairing of the committee. Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Yeah, thanks very much for that.
Chair.
Thank you. And yes, I absolutely endorse what you were saying earlier on. It is a very complex area, and certainly we had a recommendation about reducing jargon, but it's necessarily very complex because there are so many different issues being dealt with and agencies involved. And I think, yes, officers did a fantastic job in explaining that to us. I think, we had quite a steep learning curve to understand a great deal of the work that's done in this area. So yeah, I certainly endorse everything that you said, Councillor Woodruff. So yes,
Chair, I want to say something.
Okay, yes, Councillor Bidder.
Yes, I want to say thank you all the officers and the chairperson. They did very hard work in the cupboards. It's not easy. So they've done well. So we will see what's happened next after the elections. Thank you very much, Chair. You've done very well.
Thanks very much. Yes, I don't think we need any more votes. Thanks in me. I think my head will get too big. Yeah, so that's right. I mean, I was just going to thank all the members of the committee, and so my vice chair and all the other members for all the very good questions that you've asked in the process. And I think we have produced a very useful report at the end of it. And thank you to the education co-optees for giving up their time as well to assist in the process, and all the officers who've come along, and our NHS partners as well who've come along and supported us. that concludes the meeting. Good luck to those councillors who are restanding in the forthcoming election, and happy retirement to those who aren't. So good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.